I never thought a family vacation could break me completely, but there I was, sitting in that overpriced resort restaurant, watching my mother wave around my credit card like it was her own personal ATM while telling me, "This trip isn't about you, Madison." The irony wasn't lost on me. None of them knew I was the one paying for everything. Growing up in the Thompson household meant learning your place early. My parents, Tom and Lisa, had their roles figured out from day one. Dad worked his government office job, came home tired, and expected dinner on the table. Mom stayed home, managed the house, and poured all her dreams into my younger brother Jake. And me? I was the afterthought. Jake arrived 2 years after me, and suddenly the family dynamics shifted permanently. He was the golden boy, the son they'd always wanted, the one who would carry on the family name. I became the backup plan, the responsible one, the daughter who should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention came my way. The pattern started early. When Jake wanted a new bike, Dad would take him to the store that weekend. When I asked for art supplies for a school project, Mom would sigh and say, "We'd see about it next month." Next month never came. By the time I was 10, I understood the unspoken rules. Jake's needs came first. Jake's interests mattered. Jake's future was worth investing in. I was just along for the ride, expected to help when needed and stay quiet when not. The birthday parties were the worst part. Jake's 8th birthday was a backyard carnival complete with a bounce house, clown, and 25 kids from his class. Mom spent weeks planning every detail, creating themed decorations, ordering a custom cake shaped like a baseball field. The whole neighborhood showed up. My 8th birthday 3 months later was a grocery store sheet cake and dinner at Applebee's with just immediate family. "We're still recovering from Jake's party," Mom explained when I asked why my friends couldn't come. "Besides, girls don't need all that fuss." But the moment that truly defined my childhood happened when I was 16. I'd worked my ass off junior year, taking AP classes, volunteering at the animal shelter, and maintaining a 4.0 GPA. When graduation came around, I was chosen as valedictorian, the first in our family to achieve that honor. The ceremony was scheduled for a Thursday evening in May. I'd been talking about it for weeks, practicing my speech, imagining my parents in the audience feeling proud of their daughter for once. Jake had a baseball game that same night, a regular season game, nothing special, against a team they always beat. "You understand we have to go to Jake's game, right?" Dad said over dinner the week before graduation. "College scouts might be there." "But Dad, I'm valedictorian. I'm giving the speech for the entire graduating class." Mom didn't even look up from cutting Jake's chicken. "That's nice, honey, but Jake's future is on the line here. You'll do fine without us." I sat there staring at my untouched plate, feeling something fundamental crack inside my chest. This wasn't about one missed event. This was the culmination of 16 years of being second place in my own family. That night, lying in bed, I made a decision that would shape everything that followed. I wasn't going to wait for their approval anymore. I wasn't going to compete for their attention. I was going to build my own life on my own terms and prove to myself, if no one else, that I had value. The family hierarchy was crystal clear by the time we were teenagers. Jake was the prince, destined for greatness. I was the worker bee, expected to contribute without complaint and disappear when convenient. When college application time came around, the disparity became even more obvious. Jake wanted to go to State University for their baseball program. Dad immediately started talking about tuition payments, visiting campuses, and how they'd make it work financially. They toured dormitories, met with coaches, and planned his entire college experience. When I mentioned wanting to apply to schools with strong business programs, Mom handed me a stack of scholarship applications. "You're smart, Madison. You'll figure out how to pay for it yourself." So I did. I spent senior year working 25 hours a week at a local restaurant, writing scholarship essays until my eyes burned, and maintaining my grades while Jake focused solely on sports. I applied for every grant, scholarship, and financial aid program I could find. When the acceptance letters came in, I'd been awarded enough merit scholarships to cover most of my tuition at a respected state school 3 hours away. Jake got into state with partial athletic support, meaning my parents would need to pay the difference. "We're so proud of both of you," Dad said at dinner, though his eyes stayed on Jake. "Jake's going to do great things on that baseball team, and Madison's always been self-sufficient." Self-sufficient. That's what they called it when a child raises herself. The summer before college, I worked double shifts to save money for textbooks, dorm supplies, and emergency funds. Jake spent his summer at baseball camps that cost more than my entire college savings. When I suggested maybe I could use some camp money for a laptop I desperately needed, Mom looked at me like I'd asked her to sell a kidney. "Jake's camps are an investment in his future," she explained. "You can use the computers at the library." So I did. I used library computers, bought used textbooks with highlighted pages and broken spines, and made every dollar stretch until it screamed. Meanwhile, Jake got new everything: clothes, gear, a top-of-the-line laptop, and a credit card for emergencies. The pattern continued through college. When Jake struggled with his classes freshman year, Dad hired him a tutor without question. When I called home stressed about organic chemistry, Mom told me to figure it out and stop being so dramatic. When Jake wanted to change majors sophomore year, abandoning the baseball scholarship for a communications degree, it was treated as a natural evolution of his interests. When I added a minor in computer science, requiring summer courses I'd have to pay for myself, Dad questioned whether I was taking on too much. Every holiday break reinforced the hierarchy. Jake would come home to Mom doing his laundry, stocking his favorite foods, and asking detailed questions about his classes, friends, and social life. I'd arrived to a house that seemed surprised I existed, with Mom mentioning offhandedly that she forgot to pick up that salad dressing you like. The worst part wasn't the neglect. It was the gaslighting. When I finally worked up the courage to tell Mom how the favoritism made me feel, she looked genuinely confused. "Madison, that's not true at all. We love you both equally. You're just more independent than Jake. You don't need as much help." But independence wasn't a personality trait I was born with. It was a survival skill I'd developed because depending on them had never been an option. By my senior year of college, I'd stopped expecting anything from them. I graduated summa cum laude with a double major, landed 3 job offers before graduation, and felt nothing but emptiness when I walked across that stage to polite applause from parents who seemed to be checking their phones. Jake graduated a year later with a 2.8 GPA and no job prospects. The celebration party lasted 3 days. College was my escape hatch, but it came with a price I hadn't anticipated. Being 3 hours away from home meant I couldn't lean on anyone when things got tough. And things got really tough. My freshman year, I lived in the cheapest dorm on campus with a roommate who partied every night and left dirty dishes until they grew fur. I survived on ramen noodles, peanut butter sandwiches, and whatever free food I could find at campus events. While Jake was pledging a fraternity and going to football games, I was working in the dining hall during lunch rushes and tutoring struggling students for gas money. My social life consisted of study groups and the occasional free movie night in the residence hall. The loneliness was crushing. I'd watch other freshmen video calling their parents, getting care packages, and complaining about helicopter parents who checked in too much. I couldn't remember the last time my parents had called just to see how I was doing. When I got pneumonia second semester and ended up in the campus health center, I called home hoping for some sympathy. Mom listened to my symptoms with half attention before interrupting. "Jake has a big game this weekend. Can we talk about this later?" I hung up and cried in that sterile health center room until a nurse brought me tissues and asked if there was anyone else she could call. There wasn't. That's when I realized I was truly on my own. But something beautiful happened in that isolation. Without my family's constant doubt and dismissal, I started to discover who I actually was. In my business classes, professors noticed my analytical mind. In group projects, classmates sought out my organizational skills. For the first time in my life, people valued my contributions. Dr. Rodriguez, my microeconomics professor, pulled me aside after class one day. "Have you considered adding a research component to your studies? You have a natural instinct for data analysis. No one had ever told me I had a natural instinct for anything except cleaning up other people's messes. I threw myself into academics with the intensity of someone who'd been starving for intellectual recognition. I joined the Business Honor Society, took on research projects, and spent countless hours in the library, not because I had to, but because I finally found something I was genuinely good at. My sophomore year, I landed an internship with a small consulting firm downtown. The work was mostly data entry and filing, but I watched everything. I observed how meetings ran, how presentations were structured, how decisions got made. I asked questions during lunch breaks and stayed late to help with projects no one else wanted to touch. Madison, my supervisor Sarah told me halfway through the semester, "You see patterns other people miss. Have you ever considered strategic analysis as a career path?" I hadn't, because no one had ever suggested I was capable of strategy. But Sarah became my first real mentor, showing me that my ability to see the big picture wasn't just helpful, it was valuable. The internship led to a paid position junior year, which led to better grades because I wasn't constantly stressed about money, which led to more opportunities. For the first time in my life, I experienced what it felt like when effort actually led to recognition. Meanwhile, my family seemed genuinely confused by my success. When I called to tell them about making Dean's List, Mom responded with, "That's nice, honey. Jake just got invited to a really exclusive party." When I mentioned my internship turning into a real job offer, Dad said, "Just don't let work become your whole life. You need balance." This from the man who'd spent my entire childhood telling me I wasn't working hard enough. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. They'd spent years treating me like I was destined for mediocrity, and now that I was proving them wrong, they couldn't adjust their perception. I was still the backup daughter, even when I was outperforming their golden boy in every measurable way. By senior year, I'd stopped sharing my accomplishments with them entirely. What was the point? Every achievement was either minimized or redirected back to Jake's more important life. But that detachment gave me something unexpected: freedom. Without their approval to chase, I could focus purely on building the life I actually wanted. My senior year culminated in 3 job offers from respected companies. I chose the position at a growing tech startup in a city 4 hours away, far enough to build my own identity, but close enough to visit if needed. The salary was more than my father had ever made. But when I mentioned it at Christmas dinner, the conversation somehow shifted to Jake's new girlfriend within 30 seconds. I graduated with highest honors, multiple job offers, and a clear vision for my future. My parents attended the ceremony, took a few obligatory photos, and spent the dinner celebration discussing Jake's post-graduation job search. That night, packing up my dorm room, I realized something profound. I didn't need their validation anymore. I'd built my own support system, discovered my own talents, and created my own opportunities. But old wounds run deep, and part of me still hoped that someday they'd see me clearly. That hope would soon be tested in ways I never imagined. Moving to Austin felt like stepping into an alternate reality where my contributions actually mattered. The tech startup, Data Flow Solutions, was everything my family wasn't. A meritocracy where results spoke louder than relationships, where innovation was rewarded, and where nobody cared about your background if you could deliver. My first day, CEO Daniel Kim gathered the team of 15 employees in their converted warehouse office. "We're building something that doesn't exist yet," he said, looking directly at me. "We need people who can see around corners, anticipate problems, and create solutions. Madison comes highly recommended by Professor Rodriguez, and her analytical work speaks for itself." I almost looked around to see if he was talking to someone else. In my family, I was the daughter who figured things out herself. Here, I was the analyst they'd specifically recruited. The learning curve was steep, but for the first time in my life, I had colleagues who wanted to teach me. Sarah, my former internship supervisor, had recommended me for this position and became an unofficial mentor. She introduced me to industry leaders, included me in strategic planning sessions, and treated my ideas like they had value. "You have something special," she told me during our monthly coffee meetings. "You see patterns in data that other people miss, and you can communicate complex information in ways that make sense to everyone. Don't let anyone convince you that's not extraordinary." Extraordinary. No one had ever used that word to describe me. The work itself energized me in ways I'd never experienced. Dataflow specialized in helping mid-size companies optimize their operations through data analysis. I'd spend hours diving into spreadsheets, identifying inefficiencies, and developing recommendations that could save companies hundreds of thousands of dollars. My first major project involved analyzing supply chain data for a manufacturing client. I discovered they were hemorrhaging money through redundant vendor relationships and poor inventory management. My recommendation streamlined their operations and increased their profit margins by 18%. When the client called to thank our team personally, Daniel made sure to credit my analysis specifically. "Madison identified patterns we'd been missing for years," he told them. "Her work just saved you more money than our entire team's salary." That night, I called home excited to share my success. "Mom, you'll never believe what happened at work today. My analysis just saved a client over $200,000, and the CEO gave me full credit in front of everyone." "That's nice, sweetie," Mom responded distractedly. "Jake just got promoted to shift supervisor at his restaurant job. We're so proud of him taking on more responsibility." Jake was managing part-time waitstaff at a chain restaurant. I was developing strategies that saved companies hundreds of thousands of dollars. But somehow, his promotion was front-page news, while my achievement was buried in the back section. That conversation crystallized something I'd been avoiding. My family wasn't going to change. They had their narrative about who I was and who Jake was, and no amount of success on my part would rewrite that story. So I stopped trying to rewrite it for them. Instead, I focused on the community I was building in Austin. My coworkers became my chosen family. We'd grab drinks after successful project completions, celebrate each other's wins, and provide support during challenging client situations. When I worked late nights perfecting presentations, teammates would order pizza and stay to help brainstorm solutions. 8 months into the job, I was promoted to senior data analyst, a position that typically required 3 years of experience. My salary jumped to $85,000, more than my father's government position after 25 years. But the promotion came with something even more valuable than money: respect. Suddenly, I was being included in C-level strategy meetings, asked to present findings to potential investors, and given autonomy to manage my own projects. "Madison," Daniel said during my performance review, "you're not just analyzing data anymore. You're identifying opportunities and developing strategies that directly impact our clients' success. That's the difference between a good analyst and a future leader." Future leader. I sat with those words for days, testing how they felt in my mouth. Growing up, leadership had never been presented as an option for me. I was the follower, the supporter, the one who helped others succeed. But here I was, leading project teams, presenting to executives, and making strategic decisions that affected real businesses with real employees. My biggest breakthrough came during a project with a struggling retail chain. Their sales had been declining for 3 years, and they were considering closing multiple locations. The data told a complex story of shifting demographics, changing consumer preferences, and misaligned inventory strategies. I spent 3 weeks building comprehensive models that showed exactly which locations were underperforming and why. But more importantly, I identified opportunities they'd been missing. By adjusting their product mix and targeting different customer segments, they could revitalize their struggling stores. My presentation to their executive team was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. I'd rehearsed dozens of times, created detailed visualizations, and prepared for every possible question. "Your analysis doesn't just show us what's wrong," their CEO said after my presentation. "It shows us exactly how to fix it. This is the most actionable, strategic insight we've received in years." They implemented every recommendation. 6 months later, their previously struggling locations showed a 35% increase in revenue. The retail chain credited my analysis with saving their company from bankruptcy. When the success story was featured in a local business journal, I finally felt confident enough to share something significant with my family. "Mom, I wanted to tell you about something exciting. The project I've been working on was just featured in Austin Business Weekly. My analysis helped save a company from going out of business and preserved over 300 jobs." There was a pause. "That's wonderful, Madison. You always were good with numbers. By the way, Jake just got accepted to graduate school. We're going to help him with the application fees and first semester expenses. Isn't that exciting?" I stared at my phone, processing the conversation. My work had literally saved 300 people's livelihoods, made local news, and established me as a rising talent in the analytics field. Jake had gotten into a master's program that my parents would pay for. Guess which achievement got the victory lap? That night, I realized something liberating. I didn't need their recognition anymore because I had something better: self-respect, professional acknowledgement, and a clear vision of my own worth. But I also realized something painful. No matter what I accomplished, they would always see me through the lens of the daughter who was supposed to be grateful for whatever attention she received. The success continued building. By my second year at Dataflow, I was managing a team of junior analysts and presenting quarterly results to investors. My strategic recommendations had saved clients over $2 million collectively, and my reputation in the Austin tech scene was growing. Industry leaders started reaching out for consulting work. I was invited to speak at conferences, join professional organizations, and participate in strategic planning sessions for major corporations. But my family remained obliviously dismissive of my achievements while celebrating Jake's mediocre milestones with parade-level enthusiasm. The contrast was so stark it would have been funny if it weren't so painful. That dissonance set the stage for what would become the most defining confrontation of my adult life. The call came on a Thursday evening while I was reviewing quarterly projections for our biggest client. Jake's cheerful voice cut through my concentration like nails on a chalkboard. "Madison, guess what? I'm finally graduating next month, and Mom and Dad want to plan this amazing family vacation to celebrate. We're thinking somewhere tropical. Maybe that resort chain you mentioned loving on your Instagram?" I paused, remembering the photos I'd posted from my solo trip to Atlantis Paradise Island last year, a reward I'd given myself after closing the retail chain deal. "Jake, that's great about graduation, but those resorts are pretty expensive." "Oh, don't worry about that," he interrupted with the casual confidence of someone who'd never worried about money a day in his life. "Mom said since you have that fancy corporate job now, you could probably help out with costs. As a graduation gift for your little brother." The audacity took my breath away. After years of watching them fund every aspect of Jake's life while I scrambled for scholarship money and worked multiple jobs, they now wanted me to bankroll his celebration vacation. "Jake, I'll need to think about—" "Come on, Mads, don't be selfish. This is a big deal for our family. Mom's already looking at dates, and she found this perfect resort in the Bahamas. 5-star everything, private beaches, the works. It'll be like those family vacations we used to take when we were kids, except better." Those family vacations he remembered so fondly were the same ones, where I'd shared a pull-out couch while he got his own bed, where my requests for activities were ignored while his became the day's agenda, where every photo somehow managed to center him while I appeared as an afterthought in the background. But what Jake didn't realize was that I'd actually stayed at the Coral Bay Resort he was describing, twice. I'd been there on business trips, developing relationships with their management team for potential consulting work. The general manager, James Morrison, knew me personally. The concierge staff remembered my preferences. I had platinum status with their loyalty program. "Let me call you back," I said, already formulating a plan that Jake's simple mind couldn't have anticipated. An hour later, Mom called with her version of the conversation. "Madison, sweetie, we're so excited about this family trip. It's been too long since we've all been together, and Jake's graduation is the perfect excuse. Now, I know the resort is a bit pricey, but with your salary, we figured you could handle the expenses as your contribution to the family celebration." "Mom, just to clarify, you want me to pay for the entire trip?" "Well, not everything. Your father and I will cover our own flights, but the resort, meals, activities, the fun stuff, think of it as an investment in family memories." Family memories, like the memories of being excluded from planning, ignored during activities, and treated like a walking ATM whenever they needed something. "And of course," Mom continued, "we'll book everything under your name since you'll be handling the payments. That way it's all organized in one place." Perfect. They wanted everything under my name, my credit card, my responsibility. They had no idea they were handing me complete control over their dream vacation. "Sure, Mom, I'll take care of all the arrangements." Wonderful. "Oh, and Madison? Jake mentioned you've been to resorts like this before. Maybe you could use whatever connections you have to get us upgrades or special treatment. You know how these corporate relationships work." I smiled, thinking about my relationship with James Morrison and his staff. They definitely knew how to provide special treatment. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll make sure this vacation is exactly what Jake deserves." Over the next 2 weeks, I meticulously planned every detail of what would become the most memorable family vacation in Thompson history. I booked a luxury suite for my parents and Jake, reserved dinner slots at the resort's exclusive restaurants, and arranged for premium activities like deep-sea fishing and private beach cabanas. Everything was booked under my name, charged to my credit card, with my contact information as the primary guest. To the resort staff, I was the VIP planning a generous family celebration. To my family, I was the daughter finally contributing something worthwhile. The irony was delicious. James Morrison personally called to confirm our arrangements. "Ms. Thompson, it's always a pleasure hosting our Platinum members. I've arranged for champagne service upon arrival and complimentary upgrades for your family's suite. Our staff is excited to provide your guests with our signature 5-star experience." "James, I appreciate that. Just to confirm, everything is set up so that any charges or changes need my approval as the primary account holder, correct?" "Absolutely. As per your request, no additional charges can be made without your direct authorization. Is there anything special you'd like us to prepare for your family's arrival?" I thought for a moment. "Actually, yes. Could you prepare a small welcome reception? Nothing elaborate, just something to show them how much the resort values their guests." "Consider it done. We'll have our premium welcome package ready, complete with personalized service from our concierge team." The flight to Nassau was exactly what I expected. Jake dominated conversation with stories about his college friends and post-graduation plans that seemed to change every 5 minutes. Mom peppered him with questions about his interests, his social life, his thoughts on everything from politics to pop culture. Dad occasionally asked me about work, but in the generic way someone asks about the weather. Polite conversation rather than genuine interest. "So, Madison," he said as our plane descended toward paradise, "this resort must be costing you a pretty penny. I hope you're not overextending yourself just to impress us." The concern about my finances was touching, considering they'd never worried about my ability to pay for college, living expenses, or any other aspect of my adult life until it benefited them. "Don't worry, Dad, I can handle it." Good, good. Just remember, family comes first, but you need to be smart about money too." Family comes first. That was rich coming from the man who'd prioritized Jake's baseball camps over my basic educational needs for years. The Coral Bay Resort was even more stunning than I remembered, with its pristine white beaches, crystal clear water, and impeccable service. As our taxi pulled up to the main entrance, I watched my family's eyes widen at the luxury surrounding them. "Holy shit," Jake whispered. forgetting to censor himself in front of our parents. "Madison, this place is incredible. You really went all out." "Only the best for your graduation celebration," I replied sweetly. The welcome reception James had arranged was perfect. As we approached the check-in desk, a team of staff members greeted us with warm towels, tropical drinks, and leis. A small crowd gathered as the concierge team presented Jake with a personalized graduation cake and congratulatory banner. "Welcome to Coral Bay Resort," James Morrison announced, appearing with perfect timing. "We're honored to host the Thompson family celebration. Ms. Madison Thompson, it's wonderful to see you again." Mom and Dad exchanged glances. Again. "Mr. Morrison," I said warmly, "thank you for arranging this special welcome for my brother's graduation. My family means everything to me." "Of course. For our platinum members, only the finest service will do. Your suite has been prepared with our premium amenities, and the champagne service will begin immediately. If there's anything at all, that your family needs during your stay, please don't hesitate to contact me personally." The elevator ride to their suite was quiet except for Jake's excited chatter about the room service menu and activity options. I could sense Mom and Dad processing the revelation that I was apparently a valued repeat customer at a resort they'd never heard of until this trip. "Madison," Mom said carefully as we reached their floor, "when exactly have you stayed here before?" "A few business trips," I said casually. "Client relationships, you know how it is." What I didn't mention was that Dataflow had secured a major consulting contract with Coral Bay's parent company specifically because of my relationship with their management team, or that my strategic recommendations had increased their customer satisfaction ratings by 28%, or that they'd offered me a permanent position as their director of strategic operations, which I'd politely declined. To them, I was just their daughter with some corporate job who occasionally traveled for work. The first 3 days of vacation followed a predictable pattern. Mom and Dad marveled at the luxury accommodations while treating me like their personal travel agent. Every meal, every activity, every premium service was charged to my card, while they debated which expensive excursion to try next. "Madison, could you book us that couples massage at the spa?" Mom asked over breakfast on day 2, "and maybe see if they have availability for the dolphin swimming experience? Oh, and Jake really wants to try that deep-sea fishing charter." "Of course," I replied, mentally calculating the costs they were accumulating without any awareness or gratitude. Jake treated the vacation like his personal playground, ordering top-shelf drinks at every meal, signing up for premium activities, and generally behaving like someone who'd never considered the cost of anything in his life. "This is amazing," he told our waiter during lunch on day 3 while ordering his 4th mojito. "My sister really knows how to plan a vacation. Madison, you should do this professionally." The waiter, who recognized me from previous visits, smiled politely while I signed another $300 meal charge to my account. But the breaking point came during lunch on day 4. We were sitting at the resort's premium oceanfront restaurant, which required reservations weeks in advance for regular guests. I'd secured our table through my platinum status, ensuring we had the best view and priority service. Jake was regaling our parents with stories about his college parties, making them laugh with exaggerated tales of his social conquests. Mom hung on every word, asking follow-up questions and treating his mediocre college experiences like epic adventures. I sat quietly, picking at my salad and checking emails on my phone. One message from Daniel caught my attention. Dataflow had just been acquired by a major consulting firm, and early indications suggested significant expansion opportunities for senior staff. "Madison," Mom said sharply, interrupting my reading, "put that phone away. This is family time." "Sorry, just checking something important from work." "More important than your brother's graduation celebration?" Mom's voice carried that familiar edge of disapproval. "This trip isn't about you and your job, Madison. It's about Jake and celebrating his achievement. The least you can do is pay attention." The words hit like a physical slap. "This trip isn't about you." After I'd planned every detail, paid for every expense, and used my personal relationships to ensure they received VIP treatment, I was being scolded for checking work emails. "You're right," I said calmly, putting my phone away. "This trip definitely isn't about me." Mom nodded, satisfied with my compliance, and returned her attention to Jake's story about some fraternity prank that involved stolen traffic cones and campus security. But something had shifted in that moment. The careful control I'd maintained over my emotions for the past 4 days was beginning to crack. They could dismiss my achievements, ignore my contributions, and treat me like hired help, but they'd just made a critical error. They'd reminded me exactly who was really in control of this vacation. I excused myself from the table, claiming I needed to use the restroom. Instead, I walked straight to the resort's business center and made 2 phone calls that would change everything. The first call was to my credit card company. "Hello, this is Madison Thompson. I need to place a temporary freeze on my account for security purposes." "Yes, I'll hold." The second call was to James Morrison. "James, it's Madison. I need to discuss some changes to my family's arrangements." By the time I returned to the table, the foundation for their dream vacation had been quietly demolished. They just didn't know it yet. "Everything okay?" Dad asked as I sat down. "Perfect," I replied, signaling our waiter for the check. "Just taking care of some details." The explosion happened exactly as I'd anticipated. During dinner that evening, we were seated at Coral Bay's signature restaurant, a place that required not just reservations, but connections to access. The 5-course tasting menu cost more per person than many people spent on groceries in a month, but my family attacked it with the enthusiasm of people who'd never worried about the bill. Jake was on his 3rd glass of premium wine, regaling us with his plans for graduate school, while Mom and Dad beamed with pride. The conversation flowed around me like I was invisible furniture, occasionally functional but never the focus. "You know," Jake said, gesturing expansively with his wine glass, "I'm thinking about getting my MBA after my master's degree. Really position myself for executive leadership roles." Executive leadership roles. Jake, who'd barely maintained a C+ average and had never held a job more demanding than weekend restaurant shifts, was planning to position himself for executive roles. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Mom gushed. "You have such natural leadership abilities. Don't you think so, Madison?" "Absolutely," I replied. "Jake has always been special." Dad raised his glass in a toast to Jake's bright future and to Madison for making this celebration possible. "To family," Mom added, "and to always supporting each other." We clinked glasses, and I smiled serenely as Jake signaled the waiter for another bottle of wine. That's when his credit card was declined. "I'm sorry, sir," the waiter said quietly, returning to our table with an apologetic expression. "There seems to be an issue with this card. Do you have another form of payment?" Jake looked confused. "That's weird. Try it again?" "I did, sir. The transaction was declined." "Here," Mom said confidently, pulling out her own card. "Use this one." 5 minutes later, the waiter returned with the same apologetic expression. "I'm sorry, ma'am. This card was also declined." A cold silence settled over our table. Other diners were beginning to notice the commotion as Dad frantically dug through his wallet for a different card. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "There must be some mistake." But there wasn't a mistake. I'd frozen my credit card, the same card they'd been using for every expense since we arrived. All the charges from the past 4 days had gone through, but nothing new could be processed. "Madison," Mom said with forced calm, "could you try your card? There seems to be some technical issue with ours." "Of course," I said sweetly, pulling out my wallet. I already knew what would happen. "I'm sorry," the waiter said after another attempt. "This card has also been declined. Would you like me to contact the bank?" The panic in Mom's eyes was immediate. "Madison, call your credit card company right now. This is embarrassing." I pulled out my phone and dialed. The customer service representative was helpful and professional as I explained the situation, while ensuring my family could hear every word. "Yes, I understand there's a security freeze on my account." I said loudly enough for nearby tables to overhear. "I placed that freeze myself this afternoon for protection purposes." Dead silence from my family. "No, I don't want to remove the freeze tonight. I'll handle this tomorrow. Thank you for confirming the security measures are working properly." I hung up and looked at three faces that had gone pale in the elegant restaurant lighting. "Madison," Dad whispered urgently. "What the hell is going on?" "I secured my credit card for protection," I said calmly. "You know how important financial security is." The waiter, clearly uncomfortable with the family drama unfolding at his table, cleared his throat. "Perhaps I should speak with management about payment options." "That won't be necessary," said a familiar voice. James Morrison appeared at our table with the smooth professionalism that made him an excellent general manager. "Good evening, Thompson family. I hope you're enjoying your dining experience." "Mr. Morrison," Mom said with obvious relief, "there seems to be some issue with our credit cards. Perhaps your payment system is having technical difficulties." "I don't believe that's the case," James replied politely. "However, I'd be happy to discuss this privately with Ms. Madison Thompson, as she's the primary account holder for your reservation." Primary account holder. The words hung in the air like a revelation. "Madison," Jake said slowly. "What does he mean, primary account holder?" James looked at me for guidance. I nodded slightly. "Ms. Thompson has been our valued platinum member for over 2 years, he explained. "She's booked and paid for your entire stay, including all meals, activities, and accommodations. As the account holder, only she can authorize additional charges." The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable for nearby diners. Mom stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. Dad's mouth opened and closed without producing sound. Jake looked like he was trying to solve a complex math problem. "Madison," Mom finally whispered, "you're a platinum member here?" "I mentioned I'd been here on business trips," I said mildly. "But platinum membership, that requires—" Dad trailed off, clearly calculating the financial implications. "Significant annual spending," James confirmed helpfully. "Ms. Thompson has been instrumental in developing strategic partnerships between our resort and her consulting firm. She's highly respected by our entire management team." "Consulting firm?" Jake echoed. "Madison, what exactly do you do for work?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. After 4 years of family dinners where they'd barely listened to my career updates, they were suddenly very interested in my professional life. "I develop strategic solutions for companies experiencing operational challenges," I said simply. "It involves data analysis, process optimization, and relationship management." "She's being modest," James interjected. "Ms. Thompson's recommendations helped our parent company increase efficiency by nearly 30%. We've offered her executive positions multiple times." Executive positions. The phrase seemed to physically impact my family. Jake's face had gone from confusion to something approaching awe. "Madison," Mom said carefully, "exactly how much money do you make?" It was the first time in my adult life that she'd shown any interest in my financial situation, and it was only because she needed something from me. "Enough," I replied. The waiter, who'd been standing patiently through this family revelation, cleared his throat again. "Should I prepare separate checks or—" I looked around the table at 3 faces displaying varying degrees of shock, embarrassment, and dawning understanding. "No separate checks," I said clearly. "I'll handle dinner tonight. But I think we need to have a conversation about arrangements going forward." Mom's relief was visible. "Of course, sweetie, we can sort everything out back at the room." "Oh," but Jake was staring at me with a new expression I'd never seen before, something that looked almost like respect mixed with confusion. "Madison," he said quietly, "why didn't you ever tell us about all this?" I met his eyes directly. "You never asked." The walk back to their suite was the longest in Thompson family history. No one spoke, but I could practically hear the mental recalculations happening in 3 separate brains. The successful daughter they dismissed as self-sufficient was suddenly revealed as the family's primary financial resource. Once we reached their room, the floodgates opened. "Madison, I don't understand," Mom began, sitting heavily on the luxury sofa I'd paid for. "When did you become so successful?" "It's been gradual," I said, taking the chair across from them. "Promotions, project bonuses, consulting opportunities, the kind of things that happen when you work 80-hour weeks and prioritize career growth." "But why didn't you tell us?" Dad asked. "We had no idea you were doing so well." The question was so absurd I almost laughed. "Dad, I've tried to share career updates for years. Remember when I called about the retail chain project that made local news? Mom changed the subject to Jake's restaurant promotion within 30 seconds. That's not, I mean, we... Mom fumbled for words. Or when I mentioned the data flow acquisition that tripled my stock options. Jake interrupted to talk about his graduate school applications, and you spent the next hour discussing his essay topics. Jake had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Madison, I didn't realize." "Of course you didn't realize. None of you realized because you've never been interested in anything I do unless it benefits you directly." The truth hung in the air like an indictment. "That's not fair," Mom protested. "We've always supported your independence. You've always dismissed my achievements as independence because it was easier than acknowledging that I might actually be successful. You forced me to be self-sufficient, then labeled that forced independence as a personality trait rather than a survival mechanism." Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Madison, we never meant to make you feel unimportant, invisible, like a walking ATM." I stood up, surprised by my own calm, because that's exactly how this vacation has felt. You planned a celebration for Jake's mediocre graduation, expected me to fund it without question, and then told me it wasn't about me when I checked work emails. "We didn't know about your situation," Mom said weakly. "You didn't know because you never bothered to ask. In 4 years of family calls, has anyone ever asked about my projects, my colleagues, my goals, or my challenges? Or do our conversations always center on Jake's latest minor milestone?" The silence answered my question. "Madison," Jake said quietly, "I'm sorry. I really didn't understand." I looked at my younger brother, still young enough to learn, still capable of growth. "Jake, you're not the problem. You're the product of 25 years of being told you're the most important person in every room. But the problem is the system that created that dynamic." "So what happens now?" Dad asked. How do we fix this?" I walked to the balcony door and looked out at the ocean I'd paid for them to enjoy. I don't know if you can fix 25 years of dismissive behavior with one conversation, but I know I can't pretend it never happened just because you finally noticed I'm not the family failure you assumed I was. "We never thought you were a failure," Mom protested. "No, you thought I was mediocre, which was somehow worse because it meant you never expected enough from me to be disappointed." I turned back to face them. "Here's what's going to happen. I'll reactivate my credit card for the remainder of this trip because I don't want your vacation ruined. But when we get home, we need to establish some new boundaries about how this family operates." "What kind of boundaries?" Dad asked nervously. "The kind where my contributions are acknowledged instead of assumed, where my achievements get the same attention as Jake's, where I'm treated like an equal family member instead of a convenient resource." I moved toward the door. "Think about whether you're capable of that level of change, because if you're not, then we all need to accept that our relationships are going to be very different going forward." "Madison, wait," Mom called as I reached the door. "Where are you going?" "To my room to make some phone calls. I've got a conference call with potential investors tomorrow morning, and unlike some people, I can't just ignore my professional responsibilities during family time." I left them sitting in their luxury suite, funded by the daughter they'd underestimated for 25 years, finally forced to confront the reality of who I'd become, without their support, recognition, or approval. The next morning brought a new dynamic to our family vacation. Mom and Dad approached me with the careful politeness usually reserved for strangers, while Jake seemed genuinely curious about my work for the first time in his life. "Madison," he said over breakfast, "could you tell me more about what you actually do? James mentioned consulting and strategic partnerships, but I don't really understand what that means." It was the first genuine question about my career that any family member had asked in years. I analyze how companies operate and identify ways they can work more efficiently, I explained. Sometimes that means restructuring departments. Sometimes it means changing suppliers. Sometimes it means developing new customer strategies. The goal is to help them make more money while spending less. And companies pay you for that advice? Companies pay very well for advice that saves them millions of dollars. Jake absorbed this information with visible effort. How much? What kind of money are we talking about? For the first time, I decided to be completely honest. My base salary is $125,000. With bonuses and consulting fees, I made about $200,000 last year. The data flow acquisition included stock options that will vest over 3 years, probably worth another $300,000 total. Dead silence around the breakfast table. "Jesus Christ," Dad whispered. "Madison, that's more than I've made in the past 4 years combined." "And you've been keeping this secret? Why?" Mom asked, though her tone had shifted from accusatory to something approaching awe. "I haven't been keeping it secret. I've been sharing it with people who showed interest in listening. You just haven't been those people." The rest of breakfast passed in thoughtful quiet. I could see them struggling to reconcile the daughter they'd dismissed with the successful executive sitting across from them. Later that afternoon, while Jake was at the pool and Dad was napping, Mom approached me at the beach bar where I was reading emails. "Madison, can we talk?" "Of course." She sat down hesitantly like she was approaching a dangerous animal. "I've been thinking about what you said last night, and I owe you an apology." I looked up from my phone. "For what specifically?" "For not seeing you clearly, for taking your success for granted, for assuming you were just, coasting through life while Jake was building his future." It was more self-awareness than I'd ever heard from her. "Mom, the problem isn't that you didn't see my success. The problem is that you never looked for it. You decided when we were kids that Jake was the star and I was the supporting character, and you never questioned that narrative even when the evidence clearly contradicted it." "You're right," she said quietly, "and I don't know how to fix that." You start by asking different questions. Instead of asking Jake about his day and telling me about Jake's day, you could ask us both about our days and listen to both answers. Instead of celebrating Jake's minor achievements while dismissing my major ones, you could try celebrating both. "But Jake still needs support. He's just starting his career and you're already established." I held up my hand. "Mom, I'm going to stop you right there. Jake is 23 years old with a college degree. I was supporting myself completely at that age while you were still paying his expenses. The fact that he needs support is exactly the problem." She looked confused. "But we're his parents. We're supposed to help him. You're my parents too, but you taught me independence by making it a survival requirement, then used that forced independence as an excuse to avoid providing the emotional support that every child needs." Mom sat quietly, processing this. "I never thought about it that way." "I know you didn't. That's why we're having this conversation." That evening, something unprecedented happened. Dad asked me about my work. "Madison, this consulting thing you do, how did you figure out you were good at it? What made you think you could advise executives at major companies?" It was the first time he'd asked about my professional development rather than just my job duties. "I started noticing patterns that other people missed," I explained. "In college, during group projects, I'd see connections between different problems that my teammates couldn't identify. Professor Rodriguez noticed it first and suggested I pursue research opportunities. And that led to the consulting work? Eventually, my internship supervisor, Sarah, mentored me through understanding how business strategy actually works. Then data flow gave me opportunities to test my theories with real companies. Jake joined the conversation from his poolside chair. Madison, can I ask you something that might sound stupid? Sure. Are you, actually good at this stuff? Or do you just work really hard? It was a fair question, and I appreciated him asking directly. Both. I work extremely hard, but I also have a natural ability to see systematic problems that others miss. It's like, you know how you can look at a baseball field and immediately understand positioning and strategy? I can look at a company's operations and immediately see inefficiencies and opportunities. Huh, Jake said thoughtfully. I never knew you were smart like that. The comment was so innocently insulting that I couldn't help laughing. Jake, I graduated valedictorian from high school and summa cum laude from college. What did you think those achievements meant? I guess I thought you just studied a lot, he admitted. I didn't realize studying was, connected to actual intelligence. It was perhaps the most honest thing any family member had ever said to me. Jake, I said gently, intelligence comes in many forms. You have social intelligence and athletic intelligence that I've never had. But academic and analytical intelligence are also real forms of intelligence, and they're the foundation of my career success. Cool, he said, and I could tell he was genuinely processing this information. So, when you make recommendations to companies, they actually listen to you. They pay me significant amounts of money specifically because they listen to me. That's awesome, he said with what sounded like genuine admiration. I had no idea my sister was like a business expert. Business expert. It was the first time any family member had described my career in terms that suggested respect rather than mild confusion. The last 2 days of vacation proceeded with a completely different dynamic. Mom made an effort to ask about my work and actually listened to the answers. Dad showed genuine interest in my post-acquisition opportunities at Dataflow. Jake peppered me with questions about business strategy and expressed amazement at the scope of my responsibilities. But the real test would come after we returned home, when the novelty of my success wore off and old patterns reasserted themselves. On our final night, I found myself alone on the beach, reflecting on the week's events. The confrontation had been necessary, but I wasn't naive enough to think one vacation would fundamentally change family dynamics that had been entrenched for 25 years. James Morrison found me there as I was watching the sunset. Miss Thompson, I hope your family enjoyed their stay with us. They did, James. Thank you for all your help with the arrangements. If I may say so, you handled a challenging situation with remarkable grace. Family dynamics can be complex. I laughed. That's diplomatic of you. We see all kinds of family situations in this business. What impressed me was your ability to set boundaries while still maintaining your generosity. Not everyone can manage that balance. I'm still learning, I admitted. Well, for what it's worth, your family seemed to gain a new appreciation for who you are. That's not always possible, even with the most dramatic revelations. He was right. Whether the appreciation would last remained to be seen, but at least the foundation had been laid for more honest relationships. The flight home was quieter but more comfortable than our arrival. Jake spent most of the time asking thoughtful questions about my career path and expressing genuine interest in my upcoming projects. Mom made several comments about how proud she was of my success, though I could tell she was still adjusting to this new version of her daughter. Dad surprised me most by asking about my long-term goals and whether I was happy with my career trajectory. It was the kind of parental interest I'd craved for years, but never received. As we landed in Austin, I felt cautiously optimistic about the future. The confrontation at the resort had forced my family to see me clearly for the first time, and their initial reactions suggested genuine desire to build better relationships. But I also knew that real change would require consistent effort over time, not just the shock of discovering they'd underestimated me. 3 weeks later, I would discover exactly how sincere their newfound respect actually was. The test came when I called to share news about a major promotion. Dataflow's acquisition had led to an offer to head up the new Strategic Operations Division for the entire company, with a salary increase to $175,000 plus equity. Mom, I wanted to share some exciting news. I've been offered a senior leadership position that would make me one of the youngest division heads in the company's history. That's wonderful, Madison. Your father and I are so proud of you. When do you start? Next month. It means relocating to Denver, but the opportunity is incredible. Denver? Oh, honey, that's so far away. What about family dinners? What about Jake's graduate school graduation next year? And there it was. Within 30 seconds, my career advancement had been reframed as an inconvenience to family logistics. Mom, this is the kind of opportunity that comes once in a career. I thought you'd be excited for me. Of course we're excited. We just wish it wasn't so far away. Can't you find something similar here in Texas? I closed my eyes, recognizing the familiar pattern. My achievements were acceptable as long as they didn't disrupt their expectations or convenience. No, Mom, I can't find something similar here because this is a unique position with a company I've helped build. This is what career advancement looks like. Well, you know best about these things. By the way, Jake just got his first interview for an internship. We're taking him shopping for interview clothes this weekend. Jake's internship interview received shopping trip support. My promotion to senior leadership warranted 30 seconds of attention before being dismissed as geographically inconvenient. Some things, I realized, would never change. But that was okay, because I had changed. I no longer needed their validation to know my worth. The beach conversation with James Morrison had been right. I'd learned to set boundaries while maintaining generosity, and that balance would serve me well regardless of whether my family ever truly appreciated who I'd become. 2 months later, I moved to Denver and threw myself into building the Strategic Operations Division. My family attended my going-away dinner, expressed appropriate pride in my success, and returned to treating Jake's minor milestones as front-page news while relegating my major achievements to footnote status. But for the first time in my life, their dismissal didn't define my self-worth. I'd finally learned the difference between being alone and being free. And freedom, I discovered, felt a lot like finally coming home to myself.